We're going to call the budget meeting to order. The video is on and audio is on. With us tonight, we have our CPA, Tara Dunford, who will present the budget.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Tara Dunford. I'm the city's contract CPA. I've met with you a few times remotely. Happy to be here in person tonight to go over the budget. This is a first read of the preliminary budget. We have two scheduled ordinance reads. The next one will happen November 20th, and then ideally final read and adoption would happen at the first meeting in December. As a reminder, council must approve the budget by end of 2024 for 2025. And this is a draft budget book. We know there may be a few corrections and errors. I apologize for that. We did our best, but we will continue to update as we go through this process. I want to start by jumping right into the numbers.
Can we enlarge that by any chance?
Yes. Is that, well, slightly better, maybe?
Get closer, Cam.
My Bible. I have it in front of me. I'm very.
Okay. Yes, you should all have this in your packet. So starting on the budget summary page, this is a brief summary of all of the city's funds. This will tie to later pages in the budget book where we detail out revenues and expenses by fund. Council will approve the budget at the fund level, but of course you can ask for details at any time of what comprises the numbers that are in very summarized form here. The first thing I want to point out is we were proposing a general fund budget with a truly structurally balanced budget. So this is a budget that has very few increases over last year. In fact, a significant decrease in staff from what the city had when the 2024 budget was adopted. The only substantial decrease in fund balance that we are proposing is a decrease of just under $200,000 in the bond fund. So that's finishing up the City Hall bond project. Other than that, we're maintaining status quo for the most part, just at a very summarized level. So looking at the general fund in more detail on the next section. Actually, we'll talk about authorized positions here just briefly. So this is a required portion of the budget document. Council must authorize the number of positions that the city is authorized to have and the pay ranges for those positions. So you have 6 full-time positions currently, and those are the ones that are being asked to be maintained next year. And then there are some other part-time and contract positions. In your handout, the fire chief stipend is incorrect. It is correct on your screen here. It should be $1,500 a month. I made an error on the first draft of that, so it incorrectly shows in your packet. We will get this corrected for the next presentation. It is $1,500 per month.
Hand me that for magnifying glass.
Still got that magnifying glass?
No, never mind. Nick needs it.
Looking at the general fund, we do have a public hearing on general fund revenue sources later this evening, so we'll get into revenues in a little bit more detail later. But at a summary level, you'll notice that revenues are significantly lower in this budget than they were in the 2024 budget. Honestly, taxes were just over budgeted in 2024. The assumption was the mill was continuing to run or would reopen, and utility tax revenue was projected to be very high. B&O tax revenue was projected to be very high. That is just simply not realistic or good budgeting. So we've adjusted all of those numbers downwards for 2025. I'm very comfortable that the 2025 revenue projections are reasonable and likely to occur as long as things continue along the way that they have. They're really close in line with projections for 2024. On the expenditure side, we are, again, presenting you a balanced budget. This budget is truly structurally balanced, where one-time expenses and revenues are not reflected here in the general fund budget. It's reflective of ongoing expenses, ongoing revenues, and it is balanced. The big change that you'll notice in both the revenue and the expense numbers is that the EMS revenues and the EMS expenses have been pulled out of the general fund with the 2025 budget. So if you look at your tax revenue and you wonder why are your projected taxes 1.2 million in 2024 and less than $1 million in 2025, that would seem concerning at its face. That difference is the EMS utility taxes, which are being moved to the EMS fund. We'll cover that in a moment. So that's what's accounting for that change. It's offset by a significant decrease in expenditures below. In the fire and ambulance line, you see expenses going from 363 in 2024 to less than 130,000 in 2025. Again, this maintains the staff that the city currently has. It does not add any new positions. Would you like me to pause for questions on the general fund before we continue, or do you want to do questions at the end?
I know I'm just seeing this information as of today, so I really am processing it as you're going. So I know I don't have any questions as of yet.
Okay. Perfect. I'm informal, so please interrupt me if anybody has questions.
I'm basically the
along the
same
way.
boat.
Okay, yeah, we're basically in the same boat. We're maintaining status quo. I will say the revenue projections are conservative. We would hope that the actuals will come in a little higher next year, and we would hope that the expenses will be slightly lower. So that's always our best case or optimistic scenario. We want to present you something that says, this is a very realistic view of what you're going to bring in next year. And this is the highest amount that we project to spend next year based on our current, and we hope that that position will be a little bit more favorable by year end. Of course, we don't know that. Your fund balance, I think it's always useful to look at your fund balance as a percent of expenditures. So if we go back to 2023, we'll see that the fund balance was drawn down to 8% of total expenditures. That's extremely low. Budget best practices would typically call for the general fund balance to be somewhere between 15 and 25% of expenditures. So the fact that we got down so low in 2023 is really concerning. Based on the actions that have been taken this year, that balance is creeping up slightly by the end of 2024, and we're projecting it to be slightly higher at the end of 2025, coming up to 14%. This is something the city really needs to look at long term, though. This is not ideal. This does not give you any substantial cushion if you were to run into an unplanned emergency or a one-time expense. So things are looking better, absolutely. The budget is stabilized in the general fund in the sense that you can afford what you currently have, but you don't have a lot of stability. So that's something to work forward.
Can I ask for some clarification here? So I'm looking at the differences between what's reflected in the 2025 budget summary and in, oh, I see, okay, this is actually looking at just, okay, so in the general fund specifically, we're looking at no deficit.
Correct.
But we're not actually adding anything to that fund either.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
That's fine.
The nice, I mean, not that it's a good good thing per se, but I mean, one thing you could look at is the debt service that's in here. So there's $48,000, actually $49,000. That's interfund loans. We'll talk about that at the very end. Those will eventually get paid off, and then that is money that could either go towards other programming in the general fund or to start building up your reserves.
So when we talk about building reserve, would that reserve typically be located in the general fund?
You could either do it in the general fund or establish a separate fund, something like a rainy day fund is often what cities refer to it as, a rainy day or contingency fund.
So our ending fund, will be, somewhere in the ballpark, 15%.
Yeah, correct. Okay. The city has quite a few smaller funds, so this is the fire equipment fund, which is you can think of it as a sub-fund of the general fund. It is established in code, and it's funded by a portion of the 5% utility tax. It's for equipment replacement. So that 5% of the utility tax gets split between this fund and the next equipment reserve fund that we'll talk about. So the tax money that you see is utility tax money. And this is paying for 75% of the fire truck loan. The rest is coming out of the general fund. Also in this budget, we do have $18,000 for fire gear. The equipment reserve is where the rest of the 5% portion of utility tax goes. This is paying the debt service on the police vehicle loan, which will be paid off in 2025, and then it's paying for Springbrook software as well. Drug seizure fund, I've included it because you have it this fund. There's no revenue or expenditures projected for next year. Advanced payment cemetery, if customers would like to make payments on cemetery plots, they can do so within this fund. We don't budget any revenue for it. If it comes in, that's great. We don't have to budget for it, and there are no expenditures to happen here until the cemetery is done taking new loans.
This fund doesn't look like it has changed much over the period of time.
Correct.
Is that something we could put in a high yield account and draw some more money off of since we're not using it much?
That's a great question. And yes, the cash management portion of the budget is a little bit separate from your funds. So the easiest way, I try to tie this to how your personal finances might look. If you say your net worth, say, is $10,000, that could be comprised of money in a checking account and money in a savings account and money in a CD. What you have to do when you're looking at these funds is think about the funds are all almost like a family. So if you have yourself and a spouse and a child, those are funds, if you will. And your net worth can then be compiled or held separately. Maybe you have one checking account that your entire family uses, or maybe you have a checking account and a savings account, but all 10 of you are putting resources into there. And that's kind of what's happening with the funds is you have many funds and they're all accounted for separately. They all have their own balance and we can know what their balance truly is, but they don't have their own individual checking accounts or their own individual savings account. You have, in a best practice, you'd have a checking account and an investment account that compiles all of your resources. I know the city is working to invest as much as possible in the local government pool, but there's not going to be a one-on-one tie where we say we're putting this $9,000 in the LGIP. Next is the Mac Franco Park Operating Fund. So this fund is funded by transfers in from the trust account, which we'll discuss at the very end. This is interest revenue on the trust account that's transferred in to pay for operating expenses at the park. We're not requesting any substantial change here. In fact, a slight decrease in 2025 compared to 2024. The balance in this fund does stay here in this fund only for use on park operations. The street fund is maintaining fairly stable from 2024 to 2025 budget. Nothing particular changing here. You'll notice salaries and benefits are going down a little bit. That is reflective of less staff. So when you had more administrative staff, admin staff were allocated across all of your funds. So you'll see the salaries numbers going down in every fund. One thing I want to mention, when you're thinking about the street fund, it's important to remember that this has a really close tie to the general fund. So the street fund is funded partially by motor vehicle fuel taxes. That's the intergovernmental revenue that shows up of $32,700 for 2025. That funding source is restricted for street operations and maintenance, so you must use it on streets. The 84,375 is a portion of your property and utility tax revenue that we allocate during the budget process, simply to balance the street fund. If you cut your street expenses down, it would free up more money to go to the general fund. So when you're thinking of the general fund and the general fund deficit or fund balance or shortfall or surplus, remember that streets needs to be considered as part of that because it has a direct tie and a direct impact. You could almost think of it as a department of the general fund.
Could I ask, so for the other street operating, what sorts of services or products is that line used for?
Oh. So in streets, we have an insurance. $5,000 of the citywide insurance is allocated there. There are just regular operating supplies for sidewalks, accounts for approximately 4,200.
This is
Street
for
cleans,
Sidewalk repairs?
yes.
Street cleaning?
Yep. Yeah, just small supplies, and insurance is the big ticket item in there.
The insurance, is that for things like somebody trips or?
It's the general city liability insurance that gets allocated. So yes, it would cover trip and fall, vehicles, employee injuries, the whole shebang.
Got it, so that is under the street budget, right?
Yes, correct. And then I see the other big ticket item that's in there is utilities. So the cost of running streetlights and
Okay.
et cetera.
Okay.
So that's 33,000.
On that, is the mowing and landscaping of Main Street, Second Street part of that too? Does that come out of that street? Out of that street fund, out of that 80,000, is that where we have a contract with an agency to come in and mow and do the different deals? And would that be reflective in this part too then?
Yes, the portion that's related to street maintenance would get charged to streets. Yes.
And we don't have
That's in the
contracting
public
that
works.
comes in to do
Correct.
that. They only do the cemetery now.
But Public Works too, when they go to work out on the streets or anything like that, if they've got anything going on, unless it's stormwater related, because then I think that goes to the stormwater portion.
Yeah.
So the cemetery guys are getting paid out of the cemetery.
Cemetery will come out of cemetery, out of parks or cemetery, yeah.
Could you say a little bit more about the relationship between the street fund and the general fund? I think I'm not totally understanding
Yeah, the street fund is required to be accounted for in its own separate fund. You could think about it, another way to look at it, I wish that the state would allow for this accounting. You could really think of it as it's a separate department of the general fund. It really is for all intents. So if it was rolled into the general fund, you'd have slightly more tax revenue from the motor vehicle fuel taxes, and then you'd have all your street expenses here. How we
So-
balance that picture is shorting the general fund, its tax revenue, and putting it in the street fund instead.
Okay, so in theory, if we had a balance in the street fund, we could use it for general fund purposes.
What you would do is lower your allocation of tax revenue. So you would increase, I believe we have a 90-10 split in here for property taxes. You could allocate 100% of your property tax to the general fund and 0 to streets until you drew down the balance.
So, but you kind of have to adjust for that moving forward.
Correct, yes, and something to look at as you move forward, anytime you're looking at a budget where there's this interrelationship, you want to see that the street fund is budgeted to have a net decrease of 0 in its fund balance, which if we look at the street fund again, we'll see that the fund does have a decrease of 0 in fund balance. So we're not drawing that balance down at all. If you did see this balance getting drawn down, that would indicate, hey, wait, our general fund balance isn't really truly balanced because we're drawing down fund balance to fund streets rather than truly being operationally balanced.
Tara, if I could take this back a little bit.
Yep.
You mentioned something about the police vehicle loan being paid off in 2025.
Correct.
How much would that save us going forward? After it's paid off?
I believe that last payment is $6,900.
6,900, okay.
Yeah.
And that 5% that's set for you from utility taxes, is that from state thing or is that set by the city?
That is set by city council. Yes, so you can change
So that
that
could be
via
changed.
ordinance, yes. The next fund is the EMS fund, which is new for 2025. So the charges for services revenue is the utility tax that goes on your customer utility bills. The $230,000 for EMS services is the contract with Aberdeen. And then we've added $8,000 for expenses that are directly related to EMS that we will charge to the EMS fund rather than the general fund. Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund, this fund should only be increasing in fund balance until all of the lots have been sold, at which case you'll start to draw it down. So we don't really budget anything here. We could budget revenue, but there's really no reason to because we're not going to be asking to use it anytime soon. It's just there, sitting and waiting. The 1997 bond fund is an old fund. This is still something that we need to research further and determine what an allowable use of this balance would be. Likely it will need to go back to something fire related, but we need bond counsel to give us the go ahead and say exactly what we can do with that money.
I'm gonna ask, we've known about that fund now for a few months and we're still investigating what we can and where do we find the answers? How do we go about finding the answers of what we can do with that fund?
We need to contact bond counsel, the attorneys that helped the city with the original
Right.
issuance,
Yeah.
and probably pay them some money to answer the question for us.
So when you
So
say we and us, does that mean the lawyer or the mayor? Does that?
I would say the mayor or city
And I
clerk.
have a call into them.
Yeah,
We have that
We've
for
been
a while.
looking at this.
this is one, it's, once you get the answer, it's really fast, but getting the answer can legitimately be a little bit
Take
time consuming.
Yeah.
The 2020 bond fund accounts for the city hall loan. It also accounts for the tax revenue for debt service on the city hall loan. This fund really should have been split in two when it was established. The debt service should have been kept separate from the bond proceeds. Since we're almost to the end of the project, I've just left it as is in the 2025 budget. We'll roll with it. And starting in 2026, when the project's done, it will be cleaned up and reflect only the tax revenue and the related debt service payments. Real estate excise tax fund accounts for real estate excise tax, which is a 0.25% on sale of property. This can be used on capital expenditures that are identified in the city's comprehensive plan. We don't have any projects planned or expenditures included in the 2025 budget. The balance is growing in here, which is great, projected to be $267,000 at the end of 2024, and hopefully get another $20,000 of tax revenue in 2025. So there is a little bit of money there that could be used for something. If the city hall project were to go over budget or need to be added to, this would be a potential funding source. The water fund is looking pretty stable with no substantial changes. So we're projecting revenues to be comparable to 2024. Expenses are going down a little bit on the salaries and benefits side, but staying quite consistent otherwise with the 2024 budget. And you have a fairly healthy fund balance at the end of 2025 in this fund. So no real substantial changes here. The more concerning one, as I know council is aware, is the sewer fund. So this fund will likely require a budget amendment next year when the contract with Aberdeen is settled. So for purposes of the 2025 budget, we are keeping revenues flat, and we put a placeholder in there of $470,000 for the payment to Aberdeen. We don't know what that is. So your contract with Aberdeen is expired. It's under negotiation. Billing has always been done a year behind. So Cosmopolis has not paid anything for 2024 services to Aberdeen yet, and we do not yet know what that bill will be. It will come due in 2025. What the amount is still up in the air. So this number really is a placeholder now. It could be something substantially different, and at which point we'll have to come back with a budget amendment for this fund.
I have some questions here. I guess my first question is if our total expenditures, we budgeted 657, we projected 673 last year, and we're expecting a price increase, why are we budgeting for a lower expenditure rate for this year? I know that will probably change, but just as a penciled in number, is there some rationale behind that?
Yes, there is. So the 2024 projection, the actual bill from Aberdeen for 2023 services was $325,000, but the city was past due from 2022, $170,000. We had to pay that in 2024. So the 495 is reflected really of a year and a half worth of billings from Aberdeen, rather than just 1 year. Where I came up with the 470, I simply couldn't budget a negative fund balance in this fund, so I put the placeholder in. That really shows what you could afford without a rate increase.
Okay.
So this would be good informational, a good piece of information to have when you're negotiating with Aberdeen, when if they come back at something higher, know that indicates a rate increase is going to be necessary to pay for anything more than $470,000.
Should all of these funds show that reserve of somewhere between 15 and 25%?
Oh, that's a great question. No, not every fund. Your street fund, for example, is subsidized by the general fund. It could have a fund balance of 0. EMS is a new fund. You would expect it to have a balance only if you're saving up for something particular. Your utility funds, you would expect to have a substantial balance. So your water fund does have an okay looking ending balance 2025. Sewer, very concerning. And we know that from looking at your historical information on sewer. 2023, for example, your ending fund balance was 98,000 and you owed Aberdeen 170. So it was essentially in the negative at the end of 2023. This is not a new problem. This is a historic problem that unfortunately this council will be tasked with dealing with.
And it seems as though we have a even smaller beginning fund balance with which to solve that problem.
Yes, because we caught up the past due payments to Aberdeen. So that is the only silver lining that as of end of 2024, we are square with Aberdeen. But a year behind. Local improvement district, this is also an outdated fund, I believe. So something to look into. The city, it appears, has been using this fund to draw interfund loans from. So another one to follow up with on bond council as to what it is and where it belongs. This one, my guess would be it's utility related. Probably, possibly even sewer related, which would be great because it would help that picture we were just looking at.
Let's just write that on there now.
Something to do quickly on figuring out whether the money should be allocated to.
Yeah, I would think that's a priority now that things are, and I know the mayor and administration has had a lot to deal with this year. Now that things are stabilizing and we're moving forward, yes, I would hope that would be a priority in the next
There's a lot
month or
of
so
money.
by the end of the year.
Yeah, there's a lot of money sitting there.
Yes, exactly. There's actually even more too, when we talk about interfund loans, that LID fund has a higher balance. There are some interfund loans outstanding against it as well. The stormwater fund, so this fund actually has a very rosy picture if you look at it and we talk about ending fund balance. So if we look at ending fund balance, end of 2025, we see 148,000 compared to expenses of 40,000. So our ending fund balance is, I can't do math in my head, but something like 400% of expenses. So really, really high. One would almost say too high. So maybe you should look at, do you have significant storm capital projects that should be happening or major repairs that should be happening? That would be a very reasonable use of fund balance at this point in this fund. Maybe the city is saving for something, I don't know. But the fund balance is quite high here relative to expenses, which is a good problem to have. The McRakel Park Reserve Fund, this fund accounts for an original trust of $320,547. The original trust deposit was to remain intact with interest income used for McRakel Park expenses. Prior administration did draw interfund loans on this account. Whether that was allowable or appropriate, I won't comment upon, but we do know, at least we know what the fund balance truly is in this fund, and we do know what the interfund loan balances are. The sum of those two things do account for more than the original trust deposit, so I'm fairly comfortable saying the original fund is intact as it should be. The transfers out that you're seeing here on the 2025 budget are going to the McRakel Park Operating Fund. So you'll see a one-on-one match of those things. Looking at interfund loans, I'm sorry, you probably cannot see this at all. I'll make it a little bit bigger. So we went through and identified all of the loans that are outstanding. It's the funds that have been drawn on against are the LID fund, the 404 LID fund that's outstanding, and the Macrenco Park Fund. So I'm showing here what our ending balances are at the end of 2025. We'll have one of the loans paid off against the LID fund. Still having just under 15,000 owed to the LID fund from the general fund, and then a total of approximately $62,000 owed to Macrenco Park Reserve from the general fund. And we are making those transfers as per established ordinances. That concludes the preliminary budget. I'm happy to answer questions or take comments on anything that you'd like more information on next time.
When,
Could you please state your first name?
Steve Davis, on the sewer fund in particular, when do you look at revenues and where revenues come from to up that fund? I know there's some contractual things made around town that, like the trailer park on the hill, they pay a flat fee versus a per unit fee. And do we look at those funds and negotiate those funds yearly, or are they done every now and then, or are they ever done?
Typically, so to answer your first question, the only funding source for the sewer fund is ratepayers. By law, that fund must be maintained separately, separate from all other city funds. The general fund cannot subsidize it and vice versa. So ratepayers must pay for the cost of services. As a best practice, rates should be looked at annually and updated. They must be updated by approval of council, typically through ordinance. If the proposal from Aberdeen comes back with a substantial increase, I think it will be absolutely prudent for the city to look at how you're billing your customers, precisely for that example of, is there a way to pass more of the cost increase onto larger commercial customers versus individual homeowners? And you can get there with perhaps a lower base rate and a higher usage rate. If you had a different funding structure where the base rate was covering most of the costs, then individual or single family homes are going to pay more proportionally than a commercial property would.
And to your question, Steve, we are looking.
There's resolutions done every year that have looked at rate increases for sewer, stormwater, water, all of those things. And things like when the mill was operating anyway, they had their own flat rate. The Mobile Estates has their own flat rate. The RV park has its own flat rates, two of them, one for the river side and one for the not. So those are looked at every year and will be looked at again this year.
Then, so we have 5 basically pools of contracts versus individual home rates. So like the school is on one,
Correct.
the trailer park, the trailer park, the trailer park, and the mill.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I could go into the system and look for more, but yes, those are the big ones.
And so when we look at that, it's based on volume, theoretically. We don't actually meter that volume.
Correct.
It's metered one place as it goes into Aberdeen.
Mhm.
And so, is there a way to meter the volume? We still get volume from the mill, whether it's actual sewer or whether it's actually inflow. And that's kind of the next question is what are we doing about inflow? Because each gallon basically costs us, when we send it down.
And I can say we are looking at that very closely with the rates that we are going to be passing along.
Can anyone say a bit more about the salary and benefits lines and the other operating lines? Calling back to our presentation about the sewer contract with Aberdeen, There was quite a bit of discussion and questions from me about, we're paying, if our citizens are having to pay the same rate, but then we are taking on other administrative costs that Aberdeen isn't giving us. I'm assuming that some of those are reflected here in salaries and benefits and other operating. So I would like a little bit more explanation of what is in those lines and why. Where the kind of significant changes from 2023 to 2025.
So the salaries and benefits, you had a city administrator that was charged a good chunk of salary to the sewer fund, as well as the prior finance director and an additional administrative staff over what you have now. So you should see a pretty substantial decrease in salaries in 25 versus 24, and certainly versus 23. There are public works staff that are left in there.
Okay.
And there's an allocation of admin staff. So your city clerk time, your utility billing clerk time, they are getting charged here. Your public works staff still have work that they need to do on their system. So Aberdeen wouldn't do any work in Cosmopolis on your system. That would be your own public works staff. Also, you're billing out your individual customers. You could make the argument that that's duplicative because Aberdeen's rates are including admin staff to process billing, for example. You have your own billing staff, but really Aberdeen's, I think where it will land is they will capture their costs of billing you by the $72 flat rate. So really that flat rate is what's going to non-usage related costs, such as billing, and then your usage would be beyond that.
And what about the other operating?
The most substantial item I'm seeing is the excise tax. You have to pay B&O tax to the state. That's $33,000. Insurance, again, the allocation for sewer is $9,000. There's some operating supplies, fuel. Utilities, $8,000. Yeah, the excise tax is the big ticket item at 33.
So those aren't very valuable expenses.
It's pretty lean, and we can provide these details, but yeah, it's insurance, which you really have to allocate a portion to sewer. That makes sense, and the taxes belong there. You can't really get out of that.
Well, just in terms of negotiating a contract with Aberdeen, I think it's helpful to see that we have $170,000 in overhead beyond the actual sewage service. Then, I would personally like to see that reflected in some way in either savings for citizens, if that's value that the city of Cosmopolis is providing. And so we're not billing at the exact same rate as Aberdeen. Or if, we want to approach it from the other angle that was discussed is, potentially selling our sewer system to Aberdeen. I mean, they've already essentially own our sewer system in effective terms. Then, that could potentially save us that 170 if, we say, okay, well, you want it, you got it. You're now going to be responsible for all the billing and maintenance and taxes.
Well, I guess I look at it that the only thing they're doing is processing our sewer. They're not servicing our sewer system whatsoever. They're not taking care of any part of our stuff. They're just processing our water that goes to them. We really need to work on just what we were explained to by the city public works is the excess amount of water that's going into our sewer that should be going into storm drain instead, and reducing the amount of flow that goes back over there. It's supposed to be, my understanding, a one-on-one. A gallon of water comes, a gallon of waste goes, with a charge on top of that for the service. But we are pumping way much, in their terms, water back to them than they're sending over here in our water system.
Yeah, and one question that I have, and I realize we probably don't have an answer, but if we could find answers to is that something we can resolve by using some of our, overages in stormwater fund? Or if we, if this local improvement district fund is something that we can use, is there an opportunity to save that or remedy that situation? My sort of impression from the Aberdeen Public Works folks that spoke with us was that identifying where the water is entering the system is a tremendous challenge. So it may be that we can't cost effectively resolve that problem. I think those are things we need to know as we're negotiating.
Yeah, I don't like to put that word, that we can't fix it. It needs to be fixed. We gotta find a way to fix that problem. Our infrastructure's to the point where we're getting water from the outside, whether it's from sump pumps under houses or it's just leakage through the system, the old system, whatever it is, they're processing. And they can show you by paper that they're processing way more flow than they're sending over to us at certain times of the year. So that's, yeah, it enters into that.
Did we get numbers from them? Because my understanding is that all they get, all that they really track is from the city of Cosmopolis, right? But did we get any sort of insight on them of usage per citizens, or our citizens? If you take the total amount of volume that they're processing from us and you divide it by our population, roughly, did we get a sense of if our citizens per capita are using more?
Yeah, I don't remember them giving us those or coming back to us with those figures.
Well, I think that would be pertinent, because if they're going to say that, well, we have to process all this stormwater from you, but if it's the same as what they're charging to process stormwater from their own system, from their own infrastructure, then I would find that to be a compelling argument.
Right. And then again, I don't know, maybe somebody with more history than me, is it a dedicated line going all the way to the treatment plant? Or is it tied into South Aberdeen sewer system? And so what is getting flooded in South Aberdeen and not up to par is then being net.
It's metered. Our system's metered at the city line.
That's what I'm asking.
And then, yes, it is common sewer that runs through South Aberdeen.
But it is metered here. Okay, I didn't get that answer from the public works guy. I got that there was a meter at the pump station, at the treatment plant, and that's the meter that they
The
were.
meter is at the city line.
The city line right on here.
Okay, and so
That makes
we're going to go ahead and get back on track with this, with the budget. Good questions, because we will be talking more about that this evening.
A budget question that I have is, I read the paper, I seen Aberdeen added a little bit more tax from the cable company. Is that something that is available to us also?
No, so Aberdeen has a proposal that's going through the council process for an increase in utility tax, so cable, water, sewer, storm. That is to help with their general fund.
So all the taxes that Comcast or Xfinity charges us, part of that's not for our city.
We do.
You have your own cable tax, I believe, and
And we
that
can
comes to
raise that tax.
Cosmopolis. You could raise that tax.
That's what I got for what Aberdeen was doing,
Yes.
was raising their cable tax.
Now, I would have to check, I think yours is already at 6%.
Good.
The cable tax does not have a statutory limit per state law, but for cable tax, it says it can't be unduly discriminatory, which means in essence, it shouldn't be higher than your lowest rate for other utility taxes. Other ones are capped at 6%, so typically for most places, we say don't go above 6% for cable.
Okay.
Your water, sewer, storm is where you could go higher. You already have a very high water, sewer, storm utility rates, but there's no legal limit on it. That's why it's crept up and crept up.
Thank you.
So the breakdowns of percentages of where the employees get paid from, the different departments and funds and all that, how is that set? And who sets those and can those be changed?
We do
The incremental, where they're taken.
Yep, that's a great great question. We do a cost allocation analysis of that, and that's certainly something we could provide. I think I can get you a number pretty quickly.
Yeah, that they're getting more from one fund or, you know, whatever, it could be adjusted.
Yes,
So,
it can be adjusted. We have to be careful that it's a reasonable basis for adjustment. So for example, we have finance administrative staff that are charged 80% to the general fund and then 10% each to water sewer. Could we look at that? Yes, we need to really do a formal cost allocation plan, which would involve a time study and some further analysis of the budget. That could be done. It would be a few hours of work to do it. It wouldn't be hugely costly. How beneficial will it be? I'm not sure. Those are the key positions that are up for allocation. You also have your public works staff that are allocated between cemetery, parks, and then the utilities. Honestly, they're already mostly in the
yeah, it's one of the
utilities. It's a,
administrative parts that, yeah, I'm thinking that could be general fund.
yeah. Yeah, absolutely something we could look at, and I don't think formalizing the cost allocation plan would be a bad idea by any means. It's an informal estimate at this point.
Tara, if I could ask this real quickly, getting back to the real estate excise tax.
Yep.
It shows where we would have a ending balance of 286,985.
Mhm.
Would there be a possibility of transferring enough of that to the general fund to possibly add on another police officer?
No, so that fund is legally restricted for capital improvements that are in your comprehensive plan. So it absolutely cannot be used for salaries. Yeah, a great thought.
When you say our comprehensive plan, the study that was done several years ago, is there another?
You should have something, it might be called a 6-year capital improvement plan, comp plan. Do you have, does that ring a bell?
We have,
Seen one,
Yeah.
Okay.
TIP.
have it
Okay.
stuff.
either, I think.
Okay,
Is it the, long color printout with all sorts of, proposed?
Graphs and charts and everything,
Yeah,
yeah.
that sounds right.
I seen it on the counter over there at one point in time, right?
Basically, in order to spend money, your project that you want to spend it on needs to be in that big long plan.
Okay, I didn't know we had any money for that stuff, so that's good.
There is money there and it's been sitting there untouched.
Okay, I have one quick question. In the general fund, we have a line for, fines and forfeitures. Is that all police, law enforcement,
Yes.
traffic tickets, that sort of thing?
Could you repeat that, Joe? I mean,
Which account were you asking?
I was just asking about in general fund, there's a line for fines and forfeitures. I just wanted to clarify that that's predominantly law enforcement, fines and
The
forfeitures.
drug seizure fund? Is
Yeah.
that what we're talking about?
The general fund revenue, fines and forfeits revenue.
Pass through the courts.
do we have any other questions for Tara this evening regarding the budget? Okay, Tara, I want to thank you. So if you do come up, have questions, please reach out to me. I will pass them on to Tara. We appreciate all the work you've done. It's very clear. We can understand, and I think everyone has appreciated it. Any other comments?
I know I'll tell you, I took a real sigh of relief when you gave us the first projections back 3 months, 4 months ago, whatever it was, when you first did the presentation. Sure gave us a lot more clear picture and was, that in terms of, even all of us could understand, and I appreciated it, and again tonight, this was really well done, I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
excellent.
Thank you. Okay. Well, thank you, Tara. And you're welcome to stay for the council meeting if you would like.
It's the end of my.
Yes, I will, do you want me to present the revenue hearing and the property tax, or does Carrie have it?
I'm not down as me, but it doesn't.
It doesn't matter to me, whatever you guys want.
Okay, you may want to stay if there's questions.
Why don't I just stay for questions? That'd be
Okay,
perfect.
that'd be great.
We'll relax in the audience.
I was just basically going to read them.
Yeah, so for the public hearing, we definitely want to go over that. Notes, yeah, where the public comment starts.
Yes.
Sure that they have, yeah.
So we do have about 7 minutes, before we go into the regular meeting. Okay,
This is, it's a sample for the requirement. Property tax.
It's due by the 27th.
Yes. Yep.
Okay, so.
thank you, Carol.
You're welcome. And your letter was really nice.
Thank you. Change the stuff.
No, it was great.
Sherry looked at it and I looked at it. Yeah.
Any.
No, if there was, I would have told you by now. I'm not holding out on you, I promise. No. You really, your next step is probably a levy lift for property taxes, which is not popular. Obviously, it does require voter approval. So it's something that the city would want to consider. Maybe start researching it in the back for next fall. Yeah.
Because now we've got one officer in the police chief.
Exactly. Your tax rate is really, you can't, I mean, could you go higher? Yeah, it's not really.
It's already
the right idea to go.
13.5%.
It's pretty pushing it already. I would go the levy lift route, but you do have to get voter approval. So that's
And the mayor's not pushing for it.
yeah. Council needs to approve it. There's a process and then it goes to voters. Obviously, there's a cost associated with doing that.
I know, we did try for a levy early on, but it just kind of.
Yeah.
We didn't dig up.
Yeah, I mean, I would say your path forward is that you've had almost a year now of stability, so it'll be nice to see when stability for a good solid year and then say, okay, now we really need to add, this is truly the only way we can do it.
Welcome to the council meeting. We'll begin our meeting momentarily.
So that. What the? Yeah, here you go. Leave it down there.
Thank you for giving me.
All rise for the pledge, please. I
Pledge
allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
You may be seated. This is Mayor Springer. It is Wednesday, November 6th, 2024. It is 7 o'clock. Clerk Barr, will you please call meeting to order?
The meeting is called to order. I will take roll call. Councilmember Skinner,
Present.
Councilmember Nguyen,
Here.
Councilmember Spargo,
Here.
Councilmember Collette,
Here.
Councilmember Darcy.
Here.
Madam Mayor, all council members are present.
Thank you. It is now time for approval of agenda. I am asking for items 4 and 5 under new business discussion to be tabled. Item 4, surplus of sale excise police vehicles will be reviewed by the financial committee. And item 5, change to ordinance 2.40.030 regarding the number of volunteer firefighters will be reviewed by the Public Safety Committee. Are there any other changes at this time?
Madam Mayor, I would like to also, item number 3, the Engine Company #1 Museum, I would like to move that, table that until the first meeting in December.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the agenda for tonight meeting with these changes?
I move that the agenda be approved with the changes so stipulated.
And
I
please state your state.
Councilmember Colette.
Thank you.
Councilmember Skinner seconds the motion.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, moving on to consent agenda. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
So moved.
Please state your name.
Tim Skinner.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Please state your name.
Councilman Wayne.
Is there any discussion? All those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Nope, unapproved.
So again, all those in favor of approving the agenda, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, moving on. Council members, it is time. Are there any comments from the council at this time? So we have a new agenda that was passed by the council last council meeting. So I think everyone's just getting up to speed with this. So at this time, it calls for council comment. Are there any council comments at this time?
I'll just make a brief comment in reference to that. The reason that we moved council comments here was so that in anticipation of your public comments, we could provide a little bit more insight into, what we're thinking for the upcoming meeting. So in other words, you would have some sense of, what we are thinking about as you anticipate what your public comments might be. So with regards to that, if you were here to make public comments about one of the items that was removed from the agenda, then please still feel welcome to do so. Part of the reason we adjusted the agenda format was so that we could hear from you and hear your opinions before we move to vote on it.
Public comments is farther later in the agenda.
It is later in the agenda, yeah. So, but that is so that you can both hear from our city staff and the city council before you make your public comments, and then we can hear your public comments before we vote on those agenda items.
Thank you, Councilman Nguyen. It is now time for committee reports. The auditing committee.
I went over the vouchers for the month, last month. Councilperson Darcy,
I have not.
fine.
Okay, thank you. Parks committee. Jeremy or Councilman Sparkle?
Got anything, Jeremy?
We met recently. We've discussed some more potential changes to Highland Parks, and we've also had a pretty robust discussion about possible changes to the Parks Hours Ordinance. I don't think that are we discussing that today, or is that tabled for now? Okay, we're not discussing that today, but please email us if you have thoughts on park hours ordinance. As we are developing parks in more residential areas, we've had a mix of concerns from citizens who are worried about activity in the parks at night. And then we've heard, kind of conflicting concerns about enforcing people not being in the parks after, sundown or closing the parks at earlier hours, where people are still using them, especially in these winter hours where some folks feel like that's a recreational space they still want to be able to access, even though it's dark. So, we'll welcome your thoughts. If you please send them to myself and Councilman Spargo. You have anything you want to add to that?
Nope, you covered all bases. Thank you.
Thank you. So public safety, that is Councilman Skinner and Councilman Clark, who would like to speak.
Always me, Mark.
Go ahead, Kim.
We held a public safety meeting Monday night and discussed a lot of issues. pertaining to both the fire department and to the police department. Budget items, looking over, trying to adjust or trying to come up with what priorities are that either entity needs or is looking for, would like to get accomplished. Simple things that are, should be done and need to be taken care of, changing oil in vehicles, surplusing out vehicles that we don't need anymore. These types of deals we gotta pick up on and start taking a closer look and getting them done in the routine that they're supposed to be done. It was made clear that our trucks are out of compliance maybe with oil changes, and limited funds has made it a concern to try to get it done. It is a lot cheaper to change the oil in the vehicle than to buy a new engine for the vehicle. So it only makes sense that that type of preventive maintenance is fitted into whatever budget either department has. Those things need to be upkept by state law, by just our own good practices. We want to bring that forward in more of our meetings in finance and try to figure out how we can get those things accomplished. They're both looking forward to separating. It's okay, they're not unhappy that they're separating. Police chief's gonna move over to the municipal building, and the fire chief will have a little bit more room and get to determine which corner office he wants here. So they're looking forward to that. Mark, anything else? Please.
No, you
help
pretty
me.
well covered it, Kim. The main thing, my main concern is the maintenance of the vehicles at this point with that oil change situation. Because it's better to spend, in my opinion anyway, a little now for oil than it is to spend a whole lot for a brand new engine.
And I would just like to add, I concur with both of you. This was brought to my attention today. Absolutely, we want maintenance completed in the safety for our officers and public works. Okay, with that said, moving on to public works.
With yesterday's water leak that the crew had to work on, and I had a work issue that came up where I was not available. We had to reschedule for next week, so next meeting we'll have a update for everyone.
We do have one of our public work representatives this evening. Jennifer, would you like to give a report on public works at this time?
Oh, yeah, I can do that right now. I just have a couple of things. One of them is the water leak. We've had two since the last council meeting. The last one was on Holly Lane. It was reported after hours. It was repaired the following day. And the one on Florence off of Corbin, the one he's talking about, that we got it shut down yesterday and we're working on the road today and tomorrow to get it open for travel. Tom is planned to have a licensed beaver trapper come out and help us with the beaver problem, and they should be starting after Thanksgiving. And Mill Creek Tennis Court parking lot was striped, and we still have a lot to do up there, but we're working with the mayor and following the requirements from the grant to get that done.
Thank you.
Question. On the leaks that we've had, the last couple that we've had, is there any indication of what happened, or is it just failure, old system?
It's old system.
What-
And the one up by Corbin, I found out today that it's a really old development that was done before the city even had that, the jurisdiction there.
Yeah.
So we had to shut down the water main to that whole area because there was no shut off there for the two service lines that there should have been a shut off there. So we had to do that yesterday, get everybody back on. And we did a temporary fix, so that those two residents at that line that was damaged, could have water overnight. And then we fixed it this morning, and then we started fixing the road. It's all just old.
Mhm.
Thank you, Jennifer. So moving on to city officials report. Clerk Barr, would you like to do your report?
Certainly, we have ongoing lots of work with the state audit that's going on. They've been on site 3 days in total. I want to thank Casey Grove and Mackenzie Adams for their help in digging out lots and lots of documentation that we've needed to get. virtually hours and hours and hours spent just getting documentation, loading it up to their port so that they can review things. We've had good round robin discussions with them in that we provide them information, they ask us more questions, we provide them more information. So they're doing a fairly deep dive. Again, this is covering 2022 and all of 2023. They will, as needed, extend farther than that if they find issues to look at. So we've been providing them with all the information we can. I know that there have been phone conference calls with Chief Falley and with the council members, certain council members and the mayor on how they feel about how the city is running and any questions or concerns that they may have. I don't attend those meetings so that they can say anything they want. We do have an entrance meeting tomorrow with the state, so I'll probably have more to report out once we pass that hurdle with them. They hope to have it wrapped up by the end of this month.
Moving on, Chief Lehman.
Good evening, council and public. Very short report, hopefully, but want to publicly thank Destination Hope and Recovery for helping me with a unhoused individual in the last couple of weeks. Above and beyond that, they community member that was also strategic in helping by donating a gift card that I was able to connect that person with to help them with some right then and there needs. Michelle Fogus, I want to publicly thank her as well. Next is that the 2025 West County Citizens Academy done between ourselves, Aberdeen and Hopeland starts in January on the 14th. If you or somebody you know might be interested, I've got 5 applications printed out with additional details that I would love to connect you with tonight. Applications are also available at City Hall and at Aberdeen and at Hopeland Police Department if you or somebody you know is interested in. It's a couple-month commitment, and it's an exposure to what your local law enforcement in our 3 communities does, and it's more of an opportunity to expose you to those things. It's free of cost, but there is an application to participate. We got a career day coming up at the elementary school. We're actually kind of excited about trying to get some things rolling with that. It's tough when there's no budget for those types of things, but we've been creative. My clerk, on her 1 day a week, did a phenomenal job of reaching to missing and exploited children's programs to get us some fingerprint kits for parents to hopefully be able to complete with their children. It's a scary subject for some people to talk about, but sometimes it also releases anxieties. And we're crossing our fingers that the supplies show up in time for the event. Otherwise, we're gonna have to get real creative. But we're actually excited to be a part of that. So that's coming up November 21st. I also wanted to acknowledge Cosmopolis Fire Department and Fire District 15, did I get that right? As well as Lifelight for providing some free training to not only the firefighters, but to the police department. Lifelight is becoming a much more frequent thing in our community, kind of like an air ambulance, expediting services to those that need it, based on trauma or whatever those things might be. And it was really good to fill in some gaps of our knowledge of how to be ready to assist them with what they need to make that a seamless process with the partner for getting people help. So kudos to Causey Fire Department and Lifelight for sponsoring that. That's it.
Okay, and I want to thank the chief for the gentleman that he was talking about, that he was able to provide some assistance. The chief has been active, walking the trails, looking at our community, seeing if there's homeless people that need assistance or redirection to services. And did this one day in the pouring rain, was out there all day, came back drenched. Did come upon this citizen who just needed some help. And the chief was implemental in doing so. So thank you. Appreciate that. Our building official, Bill Cedar, is absent this evening. He will be back at the next meeting. I'm sorry, Chief Valley, also your report, please.
Thank you, Mayor. As I've mentioned the past couple of meetings, our EMS agreement with the city of Aberdeen does expire at the end of this year. So we're in the preliminary conversations of what that looks like going into next year. So we'll be working with Tara and Carrie a lot on getting the EMS budget more firmed up hopefully by the next meeting. We did get our official award letter this week from the Department of Natural Resources for one of the grants we were awarded back in July. So we're just waiting for those funds to be transferred over so we can start that grant award, and that was a technology grant, to fill some gaps that we're going to have. These moves out as far as printers and those kinds of things that we've been sharing. And then, as I mentioned, our Washington State Rating Bureau is coming up in 25. That officially got scheduled today or this week with the state. So we'll be audited in July of next year. Looking back on the past 5 years of performance for the fire department, the water department, and the 911 center. And given our new rating based off of our performance over the past 5 years. And my report.
And is it my understanding that the rating affect our city insurance and is that correct?
It doesn't affect the city's insurance as much as the insurance. So this is what homeowners insurance uses to scale how much fire protection and how much it costs you for fire insurance at home.
Thank you. Okay, now for the mayor's report, a little bit, we're going to be having, if you've been in City Hall, you know that I'm reaching out to you, and I wanted to ask Clerk Barr, how many people are online this evening?
Let me tell you, we have a total of 10 participants online tonight.
So everyone that walks in, and I'm sure my staff is getting very tired of hearing this, anyone that walks into City Hall, I'm encouraging them to get involved, to be on Zoom or come to the council meetings. The council, myself, the rest of the staff, we do not operate the city and, by ourselves. Each one of you as citizens need to be active participants. We have some hard decisions to make when it comes to Aberdeen and the sewer rates. There will be representatives from the Public Works and Finance Committee that will be working on that with myself, with the clerk and Public Works when we start going into negotiation. This is new for the council to go tonight. If you have not seen the presentation from Ruth Clemens at our last meeting, I encourage you to go back and view the Zoom. She provided some historical data, how we got to this point, where we are. There was a suggestion about a proposal. One of the council members brought up the proposal of the idea of possibly them purchasing. If they did that, what would that look like? What it would look like if they did purchase, we would put that money in an investment pool. Anything else, we are investing money. We're going to make the most of any revenue that we have for this city. So I just want to encourage you, please listen to the options that come up. Talk to your council. You need to have a voice in what is happening in the city. And there probably will be 2 or 3 options put out there, and citizens need to be part of that decision. So again, if you do not know how to do Zoom, I have sat with citizens and shown them. I will even set up the computer and set with you or set with someone you may know in the community that may want to know this. The door is open. I encourage you, please reach out to your neighbors, talk to them, get involved. Talking about the water system, kind of just a review a little bit. With the changes in staffing, our city administrator was the only certified water technician. When that change happened and he chose a different path, we were out of compliance. And we had to have a certified water technician on staff. Aberdeen provided that support, but we were notified by the Department of Health that it was going to cost us $5,000 a day. A day if we did not. We went before the council a few months ago. They approved bringing on a certified water system manager, and that was with the Community Water Systems. They've been a very good partner. Jen has worked with the system manager, Chris, is that Oakney? Is that Oakney? And the process is, he is certified. If we have a leak he has to be notified about every leak we have. And so they notify him. Tom or Jennifer will talk about the leak. They will see if he needs to come out. If there's a concern about the quality of our water sampling is done. So he's very, very diligent in making sure that we are on track with what we need to be doing with the state. Jennifer, at this time, Jennifer, would you like to speak to your training that you're going through? Just kind
I
of
just started water certification training, and he expects in February I should have the first certification.
So we are working, it will take a while, but the plans are that every public work that comes on will have certification. Once she has hers, then we'll just have her train public works from that point. Let's see, at the time. So talking about the water system and the sewer system, you know, just again, be involved. We are working with that major leak we had. Let me tell you, before I took this position, I used to worry, gosh, what happens if we have a major leak? Well, it happened. We have talked to Aberdeen. We do have an agreement that they will be here. Chris, our water system person, will also be here first. He will be notified. If they need help, Aberdeen will be there, as they were just this week. Is that correct? You called, they were there, but you got it fixed.
Yeah, we got it.
And so, you know, they're not really charging us, they just came, but if we do need help, then they will be here. So we do have a pretty good system in place to cover any major leak moving forward. And Aberdeen is also going to give us a leak adjustment when we get the final bill for that. So I'm pleased to hear that. In our budget packet, I had to write a letter, a mail letter on the 2025 budget. I have to tell you, I looked at it, spent probably redid it 2 or 3 times. I really wanted to summarize where we've been this last year. There've been a lot of changes. It hasn't been easy for all of us, but I really feel that we have a council that we may not always agree, but we're working together to be unified for the city, to have the best outcome for the city. It talks about the challenges that we've had. I'm pleased, I'm very pleased that we are not in a deficit. If you look at the other cities throughout Grays Harbor, they are in the deficit. Let me tell you, there isn't a lot of money, but we are not in a deficit, and we are going to be very prudent as we move forward to keep the city out of a deficit. And I appreciate Tara Dunford, our CPA. She's given us a lot of guidance. Carrie comes from an amazing background in finances, but corporate. So she's learning a lot about municipalities, and we kind of talked about there's a lot yet to learn. So thank you, Tara, for working with us on that. So please read the letter. If you have questions, you'd like to talk to me, please come in. I am available and open to any questions. So moving on to new business. Carrie.
I guess it's me and Tara. Tara's here to back me up and help me. I haven't done this before and she has lots of experience in it. So the first order of business that we have is we do have a public hearing regarding the general fund revenue. And what this really goes through is explains the changes to the revenue from last year to this year and what we're budgeting. And Tara, is it appropriate to go through every line for the public hearing on this, or what is the best way to address this?
It's up to you. I would give an overview of what's changing and then take public comment.
If I can actually get this mouse to work. Ah. Okay, here we go. So you want to see our property taxes, it's a decrease, right? And if you look at the reasons why, Tara did a good job in researching this and getting us our answers. The 2024 budget was actually higher than the levy itself. So probably a little over optimistic there and what was gonna happen. This year is our 24 actual plus new construction administrative refunds per Grays Harbor County. So that's the difference of the 18,000. In the state taxes we've got there, the 2025 budget is higher than 2024 based on 24 actuals and what's actually coming in. So that's a good thing. We've got B&O tax, that's $125,000 down, and that's primarily due to the mill. We're not getting those B&O taxes in from the mill, and that's painful, but it's reality. EMS, as Tara described before, we've actually moved this out of the general fund and into its own fund. So that's why you see that decrease there. Utility and other taxes, that's decreasing again due to the mill closure. When they pay us taxes, it's not just B&O, there's actually utility tax that goes on that as well. And then we have a 13.5% tax on any of the water and sewer that they were purchasing from us. So that's a big decrease there. Intergovernmental is down 135,000, almost 136,000. And I think that Tara, oh, that's item G, I'm sorry. That's liquor and other state revenues, down 35, almost $36,000. And that's due to the decrease in PUD privilege tax. And Tara, I don't know much about that tax. Could you explain what that is?
The PUD privilege tax is a distribution that's made from the state to the county. Basically, PUDs don't have to pay property tax because they're a government agency. So the state determines what they should give to the county as a privilege for having a PUD, kind of an in lieu of tax. The county then turns around and distributes an equitable amount to cities and towns. How that calculation happens, I don't know. Why your amount is decreasing, I don't know. I suspect it's related to the mill as well. And they're probably looking at usage countywide and allocating that way. But it's a trickle down from the state to the county to cities and towns, and it's kind of an arbitrary number.
Right. The other decrease is the 100,000 that you see on item F there for grants, because we don't have that grant coming in this year. So that is the RCO grant for Mill Creek that's currently being worked on. So that is why that changes there. Others, total fines and forfeitures, good job on getting traffic tickets for us. That revenue is actually up a little bit. Thank you, Officer Bailey, for that. And then total miscellaneous revenue down 1,108. So not a huge decrease there at all, but overall, it's a large decrease of $614,000 in revenue. So I think that's something to kind of pause and digest a little bit. And that we're still being able to operate the city without a deficit. And it's everybody's input and everybody's effort making that happen. So good job, everybody. Are there any questions that you have on this? Making this a public hearing is a statutory requirement. So I think it's important that all citizens and everybody hear that as part of this presentation. With no questions, comments, discussion? Correct. I just meant for anybody here of this.
For the council at this time.
Tara, are we,
Utility taxes, we talked about inflow, we talked about the mill being down, but we still get inflow from that system. There's supposed to be utility tax on the sewer side.
well, I don't know if this answers your question, but currently, at least the water service is shut off to them. So they have no services coming from us for that. To our knowledge, we don't see anybody over there operating or doing anything. But you're right, they're not individually metered. So if they were having activity causing outflow, it would be really difficult for us to know.
On the sewer side, it's metered.
It's, I believe the sewer's only metered at the city level. I could be wrong about that. I don't know if they have an individual meter for sewer. They do for water.
That, no, it's over there by your treatment plant. They know what the inflow is. They can tell you daily.
Excuse me, I'm sorry, who can tell us?
Public Works. You know what the inflow is from.
On the
now.
sewer side, John?
For the total, not individual accounts.
Right.
It's all goes through one meter. Everything that leaves that open goes through that to the lift station now.
I'd have to ask Tom about that, if there's a separate meter for that.
For sewer, because I don't know. We-
They got a control there. They know what the flow is.
Oh, that's a good thing to know. We could have them definitely take a look at that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Well-
Because industrial water and potable water have both been shut off to the facility. Totally.
Well, their pumps are down. They have no power.
Nothing,
Yeah,
yeah,
they can't even
Nothing.
pump it.
no,
So what you're getting is infiltration. You're getting.
Correct, correct. Tara, have we met the criteria of what we need to accomplish with this public
Yes,
hearing
have
on
we
revenue?
opened the public hearing, formally opened, asked the public for comment and closed it?
Public comment.
So we will open it for public comment on this public hearing for the general fund revenue.
Yeah, it's typically done separate from public comment, so you should, you should document what time you're opening the public hearing.
Thank
Ask if
you.
there's public comment, and then close the public hearing. It should be done separate from the public comment
Thank you.
Okay.
portion.
At this
That,
time,
that is correct. Thank you, Tara. It's exactly correct.
Thank you. And also that's Chris Kokel, our attorney. He's
Sorry,
on
Chris, I
Zoom.
didn't mean to jump on you.
thank you both. for
No,
coming.
yeah, everything you said is absolutely correct.
Time we will open the public hearing for the general fund revenue to public comments. Hearing none, we will continue. It was opened at 7:33, and we will close it at 7:34. Exactly.
Okay, so I'm just reading up the ordinance.
So the second agenda item that we have is the first reading of the City Council of the City of Cosmopolis relating to the establishment of the regular ad valorem tax levy for the year 2025, making findings and reserving rights. Before I read farther, I think that this is important to understand that this does have to be passed and approved this month before the 27th. It is required by Grace Harbor County at that point in time. So this will be our first reading. We will have our second and final on our next council meeting. So I will just be reading through this. Recitals. 1, whereas the City Council of the City of Cosmopolis has met its considering for its budget for calendar year 2025. 2, whereas the city's actual levy amount from the previous year was $471,779. 3, whereas the city has a population of less than 10,000 citizens. 4, whereas RCW 84.55.120 requires that all property tax increases must be adopted by ordinance and specifically identify the dollar and percentage change from the prior year. Now therefore it be ordained as follows by the City Council of the City of Cosmopolis. Section 1, that an increase in the regular property tax levy is hereby authorized for the levy to be collected in the 2025 tax year. Section 2, the dollar amount of the increase over the actual levy amount from the previous year shall be $220, which is a percentage increase of 0.05% from the previous year. This increase is exclusive of additional revenue resulting from new construction improvements to property, newly constructed wind turbines, solar, biomass, and geothermal facilities, and any increase in the value of state assessed property and annexations that have occurred and refunds made. Section 3, this ordinance is based upon information from the Office of the County Assessor as to amounts and calculations, as well as advice from county officials that this ordinance can be amended to modify the tax rate established herein, adoption of an appropriate amendatory ordinance. The city specifically reserves the right to take such amendatory action up to and including the last day allowed. Upon execution by the mayor, a certified copy of this ordinance shall be provided to the appropriate officials of the county so as to provide for appropriate assessment. Section 4. Upon execution by the mayor, a certified copy of this ordinance shall be provided to the appropriate officials of the county as to provide for appropriate assessment. Section 5. If any section, subsection, sentence, clause, or phrase of this ordinance is, for any reason, held to be invalid or unconstitutional, such decision shall not affect the validity of the remaining portions of this ordinance. The council hereby declares that it would have passed this ordinance and each section, subsection, sentence, clause, and phrase thereof, irrespective of the fact that any one or more sections, subsections, sentences, clauses, or phrases have been declared invalid or unconstitutional, and if for any reason this ordinance should be declared invalid or unconstitutional, then the original ordinance or ordinances shall be in full force and effect. Section 6. This ordinance shall take effect upon the 5th day following the date of publication. Section 7, corrections by the clerk controller or code reviser, upon approval of the mayor and city attorney, the clerk controller and the code reviser are authorized to make necessary corrections to this ordinance, including the correction of clerical errors, references to other local, state, or federal laws, codes, rules, or regulations, or ordinance number and sections, subsections, numbering. And that completes the first reading of this ordinance.
So with the first reading completed, is there any other than the reading and then moving on?
I'd be happy to speak on this if you'd like to.
Please.
And I'm not sure, perhaps your attorney can clarify, I've never been at a council where you've physically read through an ordinance before, so unless he's advised you that, I would skip that step personally, but.
Well, so just Tara, on that note, I think we just started doing that.
Okay.
So I don't, and again, I mean, I can talk to the council and mayor about that, but yeah, we don't need to necessarily do that.
Okay. So council, it is correct, you must approve a property tax ordinance in November in order to levy property taxes for 2025. This ordinance has been drafted reflective of the fact that we are asking you to levy a maximum 1% increase. You do not have to do that. The council can deliberate. You can authorize a levy of 0% or 1%. Technically, you could levy something in between. We ask you not to do that for administrative convenience, but pick a path and choose it. The impact is actually only $222 this year. That is because of the very confusing way that refunds are handled. So refunds were levied in 2024. They're part of your base levy. When you calculate what your highest lawful is, it excludes refunds. So when you adjust for that, a 1% increase to get you up to the max allowable per state law only adds $222 to your total levy. Needless to say, that has a very minimal impact on citizens. If you were to levy a 0% increase, essentially a lower levy than last year when refunds are accounted for, you would save your citizens a couple dollars a month, or, sorry, a couple dollars annually in total. I've shown those in your agenda. So for example, on a $400,000 home, a 1% increase would cost $8.63 for the whole year. If you went with a 0% increase, you would save that homeowner $8.63. I think it's important for council to understand how the city's property taxes fit in the big picture. So your total levy per thousand was over $10 in 2024. Of that, 21% related to the city levy. The majority goes to schools, over 60%. So when you decide to pass a 1%, it's not on your total bill. Each participating jurisdiction considers the 0 or 1% increase separately.
Can I ask, so do the taxes here, are these the taxes reflected in the general fund?
Correct, general fund and streets. So we talked about 90% are allocated general fund and 10% streets.
When I'm looking at, you mentioned that a lot of this funds, schools, I'm not seeing a line in the general fund for education.
It doesn't. So when, I think it's important to point out to council, when you're deciding this, when you're making this decision, you're only impacting the city portion of the property tax levy for your citizens. Your citizens pay a property tax bill that includes taxes for the city, the county, the port, the school. You are not making decisions for any of those other jurisdictions, only the city, which accounts for roughly 21% of a citizen's total tax bill.
Okay, so the education.
You're not
doesn't
seeing
come
it,
out of the
does
same-
not, yeah, does not impact you, but impacts your citizens. I just hear that from a lot of cities. They get comments, citizens come in and say, why are taxes going up? Why is the city increasing our taxes so much? You're not. Your portion is very small. You're increasing $8, $10, something like that.
Is the 1%, is that is the maximum allowable, that is combined across all, or is that 1% maximum for the city?
When we're talking about the city levy, what you're being asked to consider, it's a 1% limit for you, the city. Now, other jurisdictions have the same limit with exceptions. So if a school goes out for a special bond levy, for example, that would increase their levy more than the 1%. If there's a levy lid lift, it's going to go up higher. But the city portion, we're asking you to consider a 1%. That's the maximum allowable.
What is the total maximum allowable when you factor in all of the different levels of government that can levy?
Generally speaking, $10 per thousand, but there are rules and special exceptions to that. That's why you're at an amount higher than that at $10.45. So there are base levies, there are special levies, there are capital levies, all sorts of exceptions that can get you higher than that. It's very complicated.
It sounds.
Are the exceptions the levies that are voted on, though?
Yes, to get above a 1% increase, Chris, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm, to my knowledge, you cannot do that without a vote of the people.
Yeah.
Now, new construction
Wait,
is.
say that again, Tara. Sorry, say that again.
I'm not aware of an instance where you can increase your property tax levy, your base property tax levy, more than 1% without a vote of the people for any type of property tax levy.
That's the statutory limitation. 1% per year. You can bank it, but the 1% a year is the max.
So in just regular terms, what is the impact on the city? We vote the 1% or we don't vote?
$222.
So,
It's, yeah, I mean, I would generally say to councils, go ahead and vote it. Councils, I think, get misinformed when they hear from citizens, oh my gosh, our tax bills are going up like crazy, please stop raising our taxes. You are not the cause of property taxes going up at all. So it's going up you know, couple bucks.
Spend a couple hours at the post office.
Yes, you're
$8 a
absolutely,
year, but
yes.
if I'm gonna live,
I'll give
you
you
know,
$200 right
75
now, if we're gonna go home early.
You're
75 years.
Yeah, you're
So
absolutely,
it does
yes.
impact us over the long term.
You're absolutely correct. The other way to look at that is that that 1% increase is so small when you know inflation's higher than that, and this is one of your bigger revenue sources. I would say, I always recommend to councils, take that 1%. It's better take it now and only increase it 1% a year versus bank it and then have to ask for a bigger increase later.
So Tara, to clarify, it's $220 total, not on a per person basis or anything else. That is the total increase.
Yes, because of the way that refunds are factored in, yes.
Okay.
Are there other questions?
Well, you pretty well answered mine.
Thank you,
Or I
Tara.
even had to ask it.
So at this point, Tara, what are the recommendations? I mean, you recommended that the council, how do we close it?
So council have met you've had the public hearing on this, you've considered it. If you would like to adopt it with one read, you could, or you can adopt it at the next meeting. You can adopt it as written, or you could adopt it with a 0% increase. So it's really up to council now. We had it in our budget calendar that it would come back to you for discussion and adoption at the next meeting. If you say, we don't want to see this and talk about it again, you could adopt it tonight.
We're trying to make a really, strong point of practice of ensuring that there's public comment, that we, if possible, we vote at the next meeting rather than the same meeting.
Yep, that's how we had it in the budget calendar, so that would make sense to me.
I think that we should put it on the first meeting of December's agenda.
Now, this one.
I think it has to be done this month.
It has to be done in November.
Very next meeting.
Oh,
that's
right. We got another meeting.
Yep.
Oh, it's Christmas already. Well, then I say that we, put it on the agenda for the next meeting and vote on the 10th.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Any other discussion? Hearing none? Okay. So it will be at the next council meeting. So we're moving on now to public comments. At this time, the floor is open for the public to comment on agenda items only. Please just state your first name. You have 3 minutes. This isn't a question and answer time. It's for public comment. The floor is open. Hearing none, we'll move on to new business for council action. Council members, at this time, are there any actions to be taken for new business items? Okay, so moving on, again, we have public comment. And again, state your name. You have 3 minutes.
Mr. Mayor, would you clarify that this could include items not on the agenda?
Pardon?
Would you clarify that this can include items not on the agenda?
Thank you. Again, a new agenda. So at this time, I will open the floor for general public comments for items not included on this agenda. Again, please state your name. Yes, we have a question here.
Carl, I've got a comment and question maybe and suggestion. Keep looking at the dollars and cents. And that's your job. And that's good. And I commend you for that excellent presentation tonight, Tara, in my opinion. I think we might be leaving some dollars and cents out there. Some of you know I work part-time in a local business, and every quarter I have to do the quarterly taxes. And then, well, every month I do the taxes, and quarterlies come out, B&O tax, your excise tax. Aberdeen, Oakland, Westport, Ocean Shores, so on and so on and so on, all send us a form to fill out for the B&O tax. The city of Cosmopolis does not send out a form to licensed businesses. Being a responsible person, I go in and I download it and I do it and I send it in just so Carrie can throw it in the garbage because it has no income this last report. How much money is being left out there? I mean, if it's $100 here, $100 there, you know, pretty soon we're buying a new hat. It's just a thought. Should that be sent out to all licensed businesses? And does everybody in town that's running a business have a business license? You're in budget season, you're not gonna tackle this now, I know it. Put that under your hat, keep that bee in your bonnet. Might be a couple dollars left out there that's not being collected.
Thank you for your comment. We have had this discussion, and we are putting this in place, because you're absolutely right. Carrie, would you like to speak to that?
Sure, we're actually gonna be meeting with Aberdeen to mimic their process so that we know what that is. It was, I don't know exactly how we would monitor businesses to know whether or not they have a license. We do have the partner portal that we can get in on the state that prints out, everybody that's licensed,
Right.
whether they're in Cosmopolis or not. Because even if they don't live in Cosmopolis, but if they operate a business here,
Correct.
they still have to have a business license. So we do go out and we do look for that to make sure that those are updated, and the state website actually kind of forces them to do that as well.
And because we are a cash-based city, you're right, every cent
Every penny
counts.
counts.
So thank you,
Here, $100 there.
you're right. Even 25 or whatever it is, you're right. So that is happening as we speak. The office staff is working on that. Thank you. Any other comments? Again, not related to agenda items.
Steve Davis, 825 Fifth. I'd like to speak briefly on ordinances and the procedures that we've had in place in the past. When an ordinance is presented, it needs to be presented to the citizens, and then there should be discussion about it. And like Councilmember Nguyen pointed out, to present an ordinance change or new ordinance at a meeting and then vote on it at the same meeting, it doesn't really follow the due process, the ethical aspect of it, maybe legal, but the idea is to get citizen involvement. So by presenting at one meeting, having a reading, and then voting on it the next meeting, it makes sense. And I don't know that we actually have anything in ordinance form that shows how we're supposed to pass ordinances. I know that Oakham, Aberdeen do, but I didn't find it in our ordinances. We just kind of followed it. So it's something, it's a housekeeping issue, not something that needs to be addressed right now. But I do appreciate the fact of presenting to the public. Maybe there is comment, maybe there isn't, but at least there is an opportunity for that by voting on it the next meeting.
Thank you, Mr. David. Attorney Chris Coker, any comments that if you're aware of an ordinance at this time or one that we need to be working on?
So that's a common question that comes up with council members, with people in the public and all those sorts of things. Obviously, you're witnessing it with the budget requirements that require a certain number of public hearings and things like that. Most ordinances don't require any public hearings. I think public hearings are a good idea. Different cities do things different ways. I'm not aware of a policy that this city has that specifically states I think McCleary, for example, has something on the books that says, I think in a perfect world, there's supposed to be 2 readings and then a vote. Does that always happen? It does not, because there's sometimes we get, things happen and an ordinance might come in where we need an ordinance to be qualified for a particular grant or some money from something from the feds or wherever, and we have to shoehorn it through, or we miss out on it. So again, perfect world, absolutely. And I think it's a good thing to strive for. I think from a public notice and a policy perspective, I think that makes perfect sense. And it is something a city should absolutely strive for. So I don't disagree with it for sure.
Thank you.
But to have a hard and fast, black and white line that draws in the sand that we can't pass an ordinance unless we do certain things, sometimes that is not going to be in the best interest of the city, because sometimes ordinances are somewhat procedural, and that we have to get through and under a time crunch. So again, it's a great thing from a notice perspective, but not always reasonably workable as well.
Thank you. Any other comments at this time? Seeing and hearing none, we go on to council comments at the time, and we'll be open to the council comments on anything at this time.
No comments here? I have no comment.
Councilman Dorsey? Councilperson Dorsey?
I'd just like to quickly thank everyone for showing up. Always appreciate to see our citizens participating in the process. And also, I feel like I'm behind on thanking our city staff for working so hard to balance our budget. And they've done exceptional work, so I appreciate it.
Councilperson Skinner?
I talked too much on it.
Okay. So at this time, is there a motion to adjourn?
Councilman Spargo motions to adjourn meeting.
Is there a second?
Councilman Collette seconds.
There'll be no other business for this meeting. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for your input this evening.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you, Chris.
So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me out. Nice to be here.
No, it's wonderful. How you doing? It's important. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Public Works on there. You know. Hey, some of the-
Well, we just get entered with everything.
I'm sorry, we're still recording and I'm trying to just shut up.
Yeah, I know. That makes sense. I didn't know that didn't happen. I remember when I remember the last treasurer lady that did send out a survey amongst the community. Somewhere she had found business licenses, so I had vetting for business licenses. I did not raise it up. I didn't do anything. Didn't have to, but there was something done. She did reach out. She found numbers from the county, however, somewhere, because I didn't. And then when I operated the city